Hello and welcome to the first episode of a tutorial on the basics of Slitherlink. Now here we are in our nice little Slitherlink. What is the main objective of Slitherlink? It is to make one huge loop that goes around the entirety of the grid. Now when you start Slitherlink, you're not going to look at the loop at first. You're going to look at each individual hexagon and the digit within. You're going to make sure that the number of lines around each number, each hexagon, is correct. And to do that, the best is to start with the lower and the higher digits. So, for example, 0s and 5s, the two extremes. Here we are with 2 zeros. We can get rid of all this information around these zeros, like this. And then we end up with a whole bunch of dead ends. These dead ends can also be taken away. This gives a lot of information about the numbers around, and you can fill them in since, for example, this three lines have already been deleted. There we go. And whenever you get a line, you need to remember, if you don't have it in your automatic settings, to delete the dead ends around it. Okay. Now, have we got any other zeros? Yes, there's 1 over 0 down here. We can do the same. There we go. Now there's not anything else we can do just like that around that 0. Now here, I think the best thing would be to move on to the 5s. There's lots of things to know about 5s. The best way to start with 5s is to start with 5s along the edge, like this one. Whenever you have a 5 on an edge, you get 2 or 3 lines, if it's in a corner, that are next to each other. That means you have to fill them in, because if you had a hole here, you would not be able to get 5 lines around this clue. So they must be filled in. Same happens over here. Okay. There's not that many 5s in this puzzle on the edge, but you do get some 5s here, where with the previous information you get some edges also. There we go. Now 5 next to 1s are also very interesting. Let's pretend there was nothing here. And let's say the gap was here. We say, okay, I want to put the gap there. What happens? We get this following, and we get 2 lines around the 1 here. That is impossible. That means this line must be here. And this one can be filled in. Let's see if we have another case that's a bit clearer, because that was already partially solved by the 0. Let's see if we have another 5 next to a 1. Okay, down here. There is a 5 next to a 1. As I said, we cannot put a hole here. This would cause 2 lines around that 1. So this must be a line, and therefore this 1 is completed as such. Now, whenever you get a little bit of information in Slitherlink, you can quite often get a cascade effect and complete quite a lot of other stuff. This one here, you cannot use the 2 lines that I just deleted, and so on. Let's have a look. We shall probably move on to another property of 5s. Whenever you get a pair of 5s, 2 5s next to each other, you get a lot of information. Let's say you wanted to put the gap here. This would create a tiny little loop, which is absolutely impossible in Slitherlink. That means this line in the middle is forced. Now, let's say for the 5 on the top you want to put a hole here. It could be in any of the other 3, but let's start here. That forces this 5 to look like this, and this 5 becomes impossible because of these 2 deleted dead ends. Here we go, let's come back. That means these 3 lines at the top make a little hat on both sides and force the following. Don't forget to get rid of the dead lines, and you get this nice little pattern for every single pair of 5s in the puzzle. Here's another one. Oops, I don't know why I did that. There we go. Here we go. And what's nice is that whenever you get a 4, you can, behind one of these hats, you can just complete it. Here we go. Here we go. And this 5 gets completed. And so on. No, any more 5s? No. We do have a trio of 5s here. This trio of 5s is interesting. Because there's only one single solution, let's just pretend there was only 2 and do this pattern. Now this forces this 5 to be complete, and this 5 just gets completed like that. So the middle 5 always has its gap in between the other 2 5s. That is always the case. It's quite a nice little easy piece of logic. I saw there was another trio of 5 that was partially completed over here, and this allows you to complete this other 5, and you get loads of 5s together, bringing us loads of information. This completes a massive amount of information. You can see it quite often gets easier once you've started. The start is the hardest. Now I did that, I didn't quite explain why with the 4, and I'll probably come back to it at a different time. This 3 is complete here. You can get rid of these 2 lines and make a little hat on the 5. Okay, now let's come back to 5s on the edges. When you have a 5 on the edge next to a 4, something interesting happens. Let's say you wanted to have the hole on the 5 over on this side, over here. That means you'd have to do this, okay? That seems fine, except when you have this 4 over here. 3 lines are deleted, making the 4 impossible. The same thing happens if you do the 5 like this. As you can see, 3 lines would be deleted. Therefore, this 5 is forced to have a hat around it like this. Now, the next thing to know, when you have 4 lines like this, is that you either have a line here or a line here, which means this line pointing outwards must always be filled. Okay, do we have any other cases like this? I seem to remember there weren't that many 5s around the edge of this puzzle. But we can look at this 5. This 5 has a line pointing into it. Does it remind you of this? It should, because you can do the logic in the opposite direction. Since you know that the hole is either here or here, you must fill in the lines, the other 4 lines. And you get that pattern. Now, shall I stop there? Is there anything else to do with 5s that I could mention? Yes, I suppose. Now, when you have a 4 on the edge and a 5 just on the next layer, you have a very peculiar situation. If you put the whole of the 4 here, you would fill in the 4 as such and make the 5 impossible. This means that these 2 lines on the edge must be filled in. And that happens, actually, it might seem like a very particular case, but it actually happens quite often and can be somewhat useful for solving the puzzle. There we go. I think that concludes more or less the first tutorial on the smaller and larger numbers of a Slitherlink. We can see that we've already made quite a bit of progress, and I'll come back in the next episode to talk about 4s and 3s and some of the more complex logic that you can get with Slitherlinks. Thank you for watching. See you next time.